We had a question from somebody who has moved a defined benefit scheme. So the question is, I transferred my defined benefit scheme worth £500,000 to a drawdown scheme with a financial advisor at the end of February. But of course, they've said it's unfortunate timing given that the market's crashed and the market is now down about 20%, and as is their fund. They're 57, still employed, but they're struggling with the work demands due to their health, but they'll probably soldier on. Now, the advisor at the time did a review, and they have enough savings to last 2 years approximately before they retire, and they require an income around £20,000. Now, the question really comes down to the fact that the person now is, they've given a risk level and they've been recommended investments. They were comfortable with them before the events, but now, in light of what's happened in the market, because obviously a defined benefit scheme, for those who aren't sure, is like a final salary scheme. It's a guaranteed promise, whereas what a defined contribution scheme isn't. And they're worried, do they need to change things now to be able to reduce? They've actually said to reduce their risk to achieve the income.
Well, I'll tell you about the way that we approach, these sorts of questions around, what should I do with my investments in order to achieve the outcomes that I want to achieve. And generally speaking, the Financial Conduct Authority has come up with 4 scenarios that might apply to a person. The first one of those is, I want to take all of my money in out of my pension. And that might apply if you have a small pension. And of course, if you want to do that, then you want to be in a fairly low risk sort of fund, and the type of fund that doesn't move around very much because you plan on withdrawing your pension in the short term. If you are planning on sort of, growing your pension for many, many, many years before you access it again, then at that point, what you may want to consider is a slightly higher risk fund, because the higher risk funds come with more opportunity for higher returns. And so those are kind of the 2 investment extremes. There's another case in the middle, which is that I want to dip in to my pension on a fairly regular basis. And I think this is probably one of the more difficult investment problems to solve. However, there are a couple of rules of thumb that can be applied. And so when research has been done in the past, the natural sort of rate of withdrawal from a pension plan has previously been assessed to be around 4% of the pension on an annual basis. And so this can work rather well if markets are experiencing their usual historical performance. And that 4% withdrawal is really what can help you keep your pension going up until the end of your life, which is ultimately what you want. However, of course, these sorts of approaches, they do come with some level of market risk because the market can change. However, a 4% return is certainly not something that would be considered, to be associated with a very, very high risk fund. And in fact, it may be something that needs to be managed a little bit more carefully and a little bit more proactively. And then the fourth option is really one where, you have some very specific and well-defined income needs. And for people in that situation, I still think that it may be worthwhile to consider something like an annuity, something that gives you a guaranteed income for life. And if you do have a high level of confidence around what that level is, then exploring the benefits of a guaranteed income can be very beneficial. So those are pretty much your 4 broad options to choose from. And really, what is a good idea is to have a think about the various scenarios that might apply, and therefore, what type of product it would be helpful to go into, bearing in mind that, if you want to access your cash, all of it now as soon as possible, that's the lowest risk. If you have a longer time horizon, that's sort of the higher risk approach.
It's interesting to hear you talk about annuities there, because they're almost like the forgotten part of pension planning, because they were the stable before, weren't they? When gilt yields and annuity rates were so much more attractive, and now people forget that they do exist. And of course, people have to realise that with annuities, you can get enhanced annuities. There's a lot out there. So if your health is not that great, you can get a better annuity rate. So these sorts of things people should bear in mind.